All right, let's just jump right into this. Today, we're unpacking a really dark, fascinating graphic novel-style explainer based on the philosophical fable, The Sage and the Abyss. We're looking at a deeply symbolic, almost mythic encounter between a solitary sage and a demon spirit. But look, this isn't your typical ghost story. What we actually have here is a high-stakes Socratic debate. It's a rigorous back-and-forth dialogue that brilliantly unpacks some massive concepts. Think classical nihilism, existentialism, and the very nature of absolute truth. I mean, it's a question that cuts right to the core of the human experience, doesn't it? We all have that metaphorical door in our minds, a space of the unknown, of absolute truth, or maybe just an emptiness we deliberately avoid looking into. In our fable, the sage has lived in a room with a doorway leading to a literal bottomless abyss. For years, he's simply chosen not to open it. But tonight, he does. And what happens next completely sets the stage for a mesmerizing philosophical showdown. Section 1. The Doorway to the Abyss, Confronting the Gathered Dark. You really have to notice how the physical setting instantly cranks up the tension here. The sage deliberately turns away from the comforting light of his candle to face this measureless, unlit space. And the void? It doesn't just sit still like darkness normally does. It gathers, it takes shape, kind of like smoke, right before it forms a solid object. And then, an unhurried, incredibly patient voice actually speaks to him from the dark. Instantly, we're hit with the realization that this isn't just an empty room. It's a conscious presence that absolutely demands engagement. Section 2. Unmasking the Demon Spirit, the Philology of Fear. So here's where we get into a brilliant philological breakdown of what we actually mean when we throw around the word demon. Now, in biblical philosophy, we hear all about the adversary, right? The tempter, some malevolent force plotting our downfall. But our source text strips this right back to its ancient roots. The Spirit reveals that while history has called it a ton of different things, the void, the question no priest would finish asking, its absolute oldest, most accurate name is simply knowledge. It's not a monster holding a pitchfork. It is absolute objective truth entirely stripped of the comforting furniture, those illusions, that we human beings constantly try to move back into the room. And this perfectly illustrates the Spirit's dialectical method. It's entirely a process of subtraction. The Spirit explicitly tells the sage, I do not tempt, I only remove. It's a total inversion of how history misunderstands demons. The text is basically arguing that the sheer act of having our illusions removed, facing cold reality without that soft cushion of myth or subjective meaning, is so unbearably terrifying to the human psyche that men historically painted it with horns and fire. It's the philology of fear. Deep down, what we really fear is the bare truth. Moving on to Section 3, the candle versus the void, the Socratic ping pong. Think about the stark visual contrast happening in this room. On one side, we have the sage's candlelight. This represents existentialism, right? It's a finite, human presence actively maintaining a vigil, literally constructing its own localized meaning in the dark. And on the other side, we have the endless abyss, representing classical nihilism, its infinite absence, an entirely emptied room representing cold, unfeeling, objective truth. This entire debate is essentially a Socratic ping-pong match between these two immense forces, the constructed meaning of the individual going head-to-head with the staggering emptiness of the universe. At one point, the Spirit actually throws that famous philosophical caution, the one we usually associate with Nietzsche, right back at the sage. But what's totally fascinating here is that the Spirit doesn't treat it as some dramatic warning. It treats it as a literal description. Of course the abyss gazes back. As the Spirit logically points out, there's literally no one else in the room to do the looking. The abyss doesn't have a face of its own, it merely reflects the viewer. It's a profound realization about objective truth. It has no inherent agenda whatsoever. Section 4. Stripping away human illusions, examining the echo. Now we watch the dialectic method go into full swing as the Spirit actively tries to strip away any final comforting thoughts the sage might still be clinging to. The crucial thing here is how methodically the sage eliminates these illusions. He refuses to see the abyss as a monster because, well, a monster implies an appetite and a plan for what it eats, and this darkness plans nothing. He refuses to see it as a god because even an absent god implies a throne, and there's no throne here, just an empty room. And he definitely refuses to see it as an audience waiting to rescue him. I mean, sorry to break it to you, but the void didn't buy a ticket to your show. The sage recognizes with total clarity that the void lacks both appetite and authority. This leads the sage to a massive, profound realization. Stripped of all those religious or monstrous narratives, what actually remains? The abyss merely acts as a perfectly neutral mirror. It returns his gaze entirely unflattered by any audience and unrescued by any author. It is the absolute grounding of existentialism. It's that heavy realization that there is no external commentary on your life. There is literally only the fact of your own existence looking right back at you. The spirit is actually genuinely impressed by this and shares a really chilling paradox. It says, knowledge pursued all the way down eventually consumes the very appetite that pursued it. The spirit isn't some external creature eating our certainties. It is what's left when a human mind finishes eating its own illusions one by one. The real tragedy, as the spirit notes, is that most men starve on the way down. They mistakenly grab the last comforting illusion, call it the floor, and absolutely refuse to accept that there is no floor at all. Section 5. Nihilism as a Foundation. The Existential Turn. Take a look at how this maps out the exact philosophical descent the sage has mastered. Step 1. He faces the void without flinching. Step 2. He rigorously subtracts all those comforting illusions. No monsters, no gods. But Step 3 is revolutionary. Instead of falling endlessly through the void, the sage makes a deliberate choice. He treats this utter emptiness as a foundation. He literally turns the trap of classical nihilism into a tool for existential meaning. And this right here is the ultimate existential thesis of this entire explainer. Nihilism, taken as an ending, devours. Taken as a floor, it simply holds a man's weight. That is such a powerful thought. The sage proves that recognizing the empty room does not mean you have to surrender to it. You don't have to let the meaninglessness of the universe consume you. You can actually accept the void as the bare, concrete foundation upon which you stand to build your own life. Which brings us to the sage's ultimate rebellion. Just look at the terms of his defiance. He gladly acknowledges the room is empty, but he totally refuses to go a step further and call that admission a religion. He refuses to worship the emptiness. So he remains unconverted and uneaten by the abyss. Instead, he stubbornly maintains his residence right beside the doorway, keeping his candle lit. He boldly asserts his own finite, human presence right on the very edge of the infinite dark. Section 6. The Silence of the Sage, the Final Vigil. We've reached the climax of our Socratic debate. Faced with the sage's unshakable existential grounding, the spirit actually concedes. Its shape thins out, acknowledging that it has absolutely no power over a mind that can tell the difference between recognizing the void and actually walking into it. As the spirit puts it, an open doorway is not the same thing as an invitation. It realizes it has no use for someone who can look absolute terrifying truth directly in the eye without either running away in fear or throwing themselves into it in despair. So, I want to pose this question directly to you. When you strip away all the comforting furniture of your own life, the illusions, the external validations, the assumptions of grand cosmic designs, what actually remains? As the spirit dissolves back into the ordinary dark, leaving behind absolutely no scorch marks or scent, the sage just remains at his vigil. He doesn't close the door, but he doesn't step through it either. And the text leaves us with this final, hauntingly beautiful thought. The silence on his side of the room and the silence on the other had become exactly the same silence. An ultimate, peaceful harmony is achieved. Which leaves us with one final question for your own journey. When the void reflects your own gaze back at you, can you, like the sage, stand firmly on the concrete floor of that emptiness, let it hold your weight, and keep your own candle lit?